Man, this royalty-free music blows. Just thought I'd let you all know what I think. So I'm an idiot, and I realized my microphone was muted that whole damn time. So rock on. All right. Anyways, what I was saying, Jesus Christ. All right, I'm gonna go through and do contrast and color correction. And yeah, I've already messed this whole stream up. That's awesome. Anyways, all right, so we're going to do contrast and color correction. Here is the first image, this gold 993 turbo, highly optioned. Awesome that the owner brought it out. This was taken down in Newport Beach. As you saw with me talking to myself, I use my Leica M240 with a 50mm lens, shot at f1.2, I believe. Lightroom says I shot at 2.0, but I know I didn't use either 1.2 or 1.4. This is straight out of camera. So let's jump on into it. I'm not going to apply any presets over here. And all right, we'll just jump on into it. The process I usually go through. So this image is a little dark, so I'll add some highlights back in, kind of keeping an eye on the histogram. I kind of blasted this part, shadows up just to get the exposure somewhat even. And then we'll jump into what I do for contrast first, and then color correction. Throw the dehaze down just a tad. Don't want it to get too muddy. All right, so first we're going to do color correction. So the exposure's or the color is actually pretty good. You can see a little smudge there because the protective film, and I had a, this will usually happen um, kind of across any bumpers or any part of the cars that have protective film when you're using a polarizer. So just be aware. You can go through, if I was actually doing this for for an actual customer, I would be editing all this out to make it look nice and smooth. So now that we have our base image, I think it's slightly cool and a little, just a tad bit too green. So a quick way to kind of go through and test the color, you just grab the eyedropper, and I like to do it on the ground or anything mid-tone. So there's actually some nice grays on this car. So, okay. So this is compensating a lot of the magentas in. We'll pull some warmth out of it. All right. It's looking pretty decent on my screen. It's funny looking back and forth between the stream on my second monitor. The stream on my monitor is not color calibrated, but my main monitor is color calibrated. So it's interesting looking at the differences back and forth. There we go. Pull a little bit of greens back into it. Slightly different from the base image. Luckily, Leica's pretty dang good at getting good colors straight out of camera. So we'll do another picture. The second image we'll do will be that an image that was shot with my Canon with a 7200, and the colors straight out of camera came out awful. I think it's just the way the sunset was. And it's funny because I've seen other people post their images and they came out very flat, with a lot of greens and kind of weird blues as well. So it's just the way the lighting wasn't necessarily the camera system. Remember, the camera is just a tool. Pull the clarity, texture up just a slight tad. Pull the vibrance up to bring a little bit of life back into it. Okay, so that looks good. So now you can see there's a good amount of contrast, but as you can tell from the photos I post and even on my website, I kind of go through as I edit and I adjust the image multiple times. I like a lot of contrast in my images. I usually do. That's just what I like. It's all personal preference. All right, so you can either manually do it. So I always, on the ground, I always like adding a little bit of contrast, or I mean, it's really just adding blacks or shadows into the bottom of the image. I always pull down the saturation from the street as well, because there's always going to be some funky tones. And then I brush away the extra bits of that layer on the vehicle, just so I'm not darkening parts I don't want to darken. And now I'm going to pull some shadows up just a little bit because I feel these, the wheels, oops. Yeah. Pull the shadows up. I feel they're a little too dark, especially for being the main subject. All right, so this image is naturally is pretty contrasty, so I don't really need to do a whole lot to it. I won't get into any of the other stuff I do on this edit. So I'm going to add a little bit of contrast to get a little bit more moody. So the background, typically you want to be for me, what I like, 2 stops darker than the actual vehicle, and it's probably pretty dang close. But also what I'll do just to make the 993 Turbo and gold stand out. I'll pull up the highlights and the whites just a tad, and easy peasy, just literally paint right over the 993, especially the highlights on the vehicle, not necessarily over the shadows, because then it might make it look a little funky. Yeah, I don't like that. So I'm going to leave the natural contrast. Just going to pull up here, kind of take that away. Check in the masking. Okay, yes, over the highlights / a little bit of the shadows. Don't want to get too carried away. That looks pretty good. Stands out. And then now to compensate, just kind of pull the shadows a little bit on the wheels again. The wheels are looking a little blue. So it's too much. Just want to barely pull up the temperature. That looks good. All right, that actually looks pretty good for me. I would be comfortable posting that. You can do other things like brightening up the headlights a little bit, but I mean they're not on, so it's, to me it's not necessary. But let me make sure. Yep, microphone's still on. I'm not talking to myself. All right, the second image. So here we go. I'm going to show do a little before and after. So here's the before and after, straight out of camera on the left, and then the edit I just did on the after on the right. So you can see there's definitely more contrast. A little bit more of the magentas on the tint, and a little bit warmer overall on the final image. And then especially with the brush strokes over the 993 Turbo, especially to make it stand out and really emphasize the highlights. You really want to draw the eye straight to the vehicle. I mean, this isn't a shot where the vehicle is really tiny along one of the rule of thirds planes, but it's just dead center, almost dead center, but it's along that bottom thirds plane, and it's bright. So I always do the test where you shut your eyes open looking at it, and my eyes lock right on to actually this front headlight here, and then my eye starts to wander back and forth. It goes down this right side first because the contrast is more relevant to me, and then I end up checking out the rest of the car. Then boom, looked at the whole thing. Go back to here. All right, second shot. We'll come back and do this one second. It's pretty similar with the darks and then the lights pulling up the front. So we'll do one. Actually, you know what? We'll go with this shot. Different camera system. Was my Lightroom crashing? Oh, there we go. All right, so this shot was taken with, oh, never mind. This one was taken with my Leica as well, but you can see Leica 50 millimeters, f1.2, so really, really shallow depth of field. And you can see the colors are pretty weird. It's definitely dark, a lot of vignetting as well. So just kind of go through really fast, get rid of the vignetting, go through, add the profile correction and the chromatic aberration. And while I'm at it, I'm going to get rid of the magentas and the highlights as well. Okay, so here's our base image. Just going to align it real quick. All right, so when you first look at this image, there's definitely a lot of blues, and it's funny because at this actual time, it was right before sundown. So this image, to me, should be a lot warmer. So I'm going to just start with the eyedrop tool. Just eyedrop it. Should get the blues and magentas right, and then I'm going to pull the warmth up. Don't want to go too overboard because then we'll start looking real nasty. And then just a rule of thumb, during the day, temperature of the light is usually 5500 for those who don't know. So that's also if you shoot during the day, 5500 is a great place to start. Kind of go down from there a little bit. There's a lot of green, so pull a little bit up. All right, next is pulling the actual exposure up. Just gonna do it a tad. Keep an eye on the histogram on the top right. You don't wanna make sure you blow out any of the highlights, because if you go too far, it'll start looking a little weird. So just pull them up just a tad, lights up just a tad without blowing it out majorly. Shadows, pull my blacks down after pulling the shadows up. There's different ways to adjust these. I'm just using the mouse because it's more visual than the way I usually do it. There's already a good amount of contrast in this image, so I won't really touch it that much. Pull the vibrance up just a tad. Okay, so since there's a lot of weird greens, magentas, blues in this image, for this specific one, I'll go into color. I mean, there's different ways you can do. You can do with tone curves, or you can actually just adjust the colors directly. So into colors, and let's see. There's a quick way to do this. So you can either go to the actual color, so you can go blue. You're like, all right, these blues are a little green, so I'm going to pull up a little bit of purple out of them, desaturate it a little bit to make it more of how I remembered seeing it. And you can either pull it down to get darker skies, or you can blow out the skies if you want with the blues, but typically they're a little bit brighter. So I'm going to pull the luminance up a little bit. The aquas, just kind of go back and forth. I think there's a little too much green in it, so I'm going to pull the blues and purples up and then pull that saturation down a little bit as well. The next color that is really standing out, that's really bothering me, which initially when I took it, the yellows and oranges are just way off, unflattering. It has like green in it, which drives me crazy. So you want to pull it the opposite direction. You gotta be really careful with it too. Just kind of slightly pull it down, pull the saturation, and I'm gonna pull actually the highlights on it up. And then next will be, this is where I'll make the biggest difference, the yellows in this specific image. You don't want to go too orange or too green. It's the greens that drive me crazy. Pull a little bit more, and then we'll go into the reds. There's not much reds in here. Yeah, you can see it. But another thing I want to show you is if you click this little adjustment hue tool, so you can do the hue or the luminance or the saturation. So like for example, the hue, you can click on it and then it chooses whatever color field is where you're clicking. So you'll click and you drag it down or up and it'll adjust only those color fields, and it's not limited to only blues. As you can see on the colors down here, you'll be seeing that the aquas and the blues will be shifting at the same time. So that's a quick way to adjust multiple color fields at the same time, which I find extremely useful, especially if you're not sure what colors are in the specific point of the image. So like on the paint, this was a kind of like a steel silver kind of color. So you can see there's a lot of blues in it. Make sure this doesn't go down. And I'm going to go into saturation. I want it pulled down even more without pulling it up too much. All right. That looks decent to me. Still don't like it, but yeah, coloring or playing with colors is very tricky. I'm no art major by any means, but there's a lot like looking at color wheels and seeing the opposite colors attract, and it's very interesting science. All right, make sure I'm actually going to touch the greens a little bit too. See, you can see along the horizon, there's that weird kind of green. Take that down. All right. So the next portion, it's still a little bit dark. So you can just click on here. Oops, don't want to do clarity, but you can actually probably do the exposure. 0.2 of a stop. Just kind of start painting over. You know, I'm just going to paint the whole thing. Here, I'm not going for precision. Oops. Then get rid of that little excess along the door. All right. So I'm going to pull that exposure up just a tad bit more. Looks good. Add a little bit of contrast back into it. I'm going to pull the shadows up, but then pull the blacks back down. So you're reducing shadows, and then you're kind of pulling down the blacks to add contrast. You can do it either way, but I typically like pulling shadows up and then use the blacks to go down. That's just me. Don't want to use too much clarity, and then dehaze. And this is where you can actually adjust where it's painted. You can adjust for the vehicle. So it's a little orange to me. So I'm going to pull a little bit of blue back in. Let's see, do I want to go greener? There we go. All right. And then let's see. Yeah, see, the color still looks weird to me. All right. And then one thing I like doing with the ground as well, I like editing the ground by itself. It's its own layer. If I was in Photoshop, I'd just cut it all out. A lot more control that way. Pull the saturation down just a tiny bit. You still want a little bit of orange in it. And then you can pull the blacks down just a little without doing the shadows. And then you can either mess with the sky. You can either, a lot of people like the trend now, I feel like, is blowing out the sky. And you can pull the clarity down so it almost looks like fog. I mean, there's many different ways you can take this. You can dehaze, you can lower it, which that looks kind of funky to me. Make sure to pull the contrast down, shadows up a little bit so the doors don't look weird. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways, but with the colors, you got to be careful. And then let me make sure there's nothing. Okay. All right. Overall, to me, it looks pretty decent. Don't want to mess with the sharpening too much. Add a little bit of noise reduction in, just in the contrast colors. There we go. It's loading in. All right. Let's look at that before and after. All right. There's the before and after. Looks decent to me. All right. Let's see. I will do one more images and then I gotta head out and actually get back to real work. All right. Last image for this little quick tutorial. Let's see. Yeah, we'll do an indoor shot. Actually, I'll just edit as is. I'll just straighten it a little bit. This was taken at Protective Film Solutions for one of their little open houses. It's always a fun time, so shout out to Protective Film Solutions and my buddy Ted Seven with his McLaren F1 shot up in the background with Jay Leno. And all right, let's dive on into this image here. So indoor shots typically end up depending on what kind of lighting. So they have warmer lighting in here, so all the images kind of came out a little bit muddier on the warm side. So first thing I'm gonna do, you can always do this white balance. This is always an easy way to go. Look for the most neutral gray possible. That already looks 1,000 times better to me. But you can see the image now is really lacking contrast. It looks pretty flat. So I'm going to add in a lot of contrast. I'm going to do a little bit of clarity. I'm going to pump that contrast up, baby. Highlights down a little bit. You can see up here it was a little blown out. Shadows. Pull the shadows up. Blacks down. Let me see if this works. Here we go. Okay, so one way to check your highlights also with the histogram is you hold down on, sorry, I'm not a Mac person, but on PC, hold Alt, and you'll see all along the right side, everything will change and say reset, but you put your mouse on it and you can go down or up, so left or right, and you can see how much of an effect the highlight is either highlighting or dimming, which is good because you can see where it starts getting blown out. So like, for instance, this would be way too much. So just pull the highlights up just a little bit. And I'm going to do the same with the shadows. See where the shadows are coming in. And where it's full black is where it's absolute black. So you can see down in the grills of the vehicle where it's typically darker, that is where the absolute blacks will be. So it's a major loss of detail down here, but that's okay. It's just the grill. It's not that big of a deal to me personally. And with the blacks, pull the blacks up a little bit. Just get a little bit of detail back. All right. And then dehaze, pull even more contrast out. Get that real kind of like gritty, contrasty. And I think it's a little too, oh man, I even want to bump the coolness down just a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more green. Yeah. See, to me, that looks better to me. Maybe a tiny bit of vibrance just because the image is naturally a lot of colors. It's already pretty vibrant. And then same thing, you can go over the car if you want to make it look like a freaking video game. Pull the clarity up, but I've been trying to steer away from using a ton of clarity. I've been trying to go for more of a natural look lately, but this shot is not a natural look. Good. And then make this guy stand out a little bit more. Kind of work on those highlights. Headlight, badge. There we go. All right. So this is an example of a nice, a nice super contrasty image, but I dig it. I love contrast. Um, yeah, you can hate on me. It's all good. There we go. Do a quick profile correction because I was shooting with my Leica and the 50mm Voigtlander. Love that lens. And if you want, I'll just go through for Instagram with the cropping. Remember to use the rule of thirds. Yeah, I'll just do. If you ever want to know what I spend most of my time on, it's trying to align images. I always spend freaking hours doing it. Might be a slight exaggeration. Kind of like this crop a little bit more, get the front of the other Ferrari in there. And if I ever post this, I gotta tag freaking Ted in it too because his image is back here. Yeah, don't tell him I said that. He's in the middle of Gold Rush right now. And then, oh wait, let me do the before and after. There's the before and after, and yeah, you can see the before definitely a lot flatter. The colors are super nasty, a lot of weird greens, kind of oranges in there from the fluorescent lights up above. It's trying to overcompensate. It always freaks out the camera systems. And hey, what's going on, Robert? How's everything? Oh man, did you miss the first part of the stream where I was talking to myself with my muted mic for like freaking 15 minutes? No, I think it was like 2 minutes, but I'm a rookie at this streaming stuff, so whatever. Oh yeah, pretty vibey for sure. Yeah, this is actually, there we go. That's better. That was way too much vibrance on that. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So that's it for this image. You know what? What the heck? I'm gonna go through and do one more. We'll go for an outdoor shot where I was like 15 miles away from this sweet Viper. Always was a big fan when I played Gran Turismo 2. I always chose the Viper and ACR Viper, my favorite. All right, so this one's straight out of camera. Again, this one was shot with my Leica as well, 50 millimeter. It's probably at 1.4 or so, 1.6 maybe. Lightroom doesn't know how to pick up the Voigtlander lenses very well, so just gotta pretend I know what I'm talking about. All right, this one doesn't need a whole lot. It was shot pretty early in the morning, probably around 8:30 sometime. Maybe 9, I don't know. I think it was more, it was before they started implementing the rules where they won't let you until 9 o'clock or whatever it is at that South Coast Cars and Coffee. I've honestly only been to that one a couple times, maybe 2 or 3 times actually, but it's always fun to switch it up. So first, just slight amount of contrast because this image naturally is already pretty contrasty. Tiny bit of clarity and texture just because those will naturally sharpen as well. Tiny bit of vibrance. Man, the colors already look pretty decent on it. I don't know. I don't know how it's coming across in the stream, but on my calibrated monitor, the colors look pretty good already. I mean, all it really needs is work on the contrast, but what the heck? Let's just see. There's not a lot of grays in this image, so we'll just cheat and do it on the floor there. Yeah, see, all it did was just add a little bit of magenta, and that's really it. Typically like warmer images. Oh yeah, super crispy, but yeah, it's pretty good. I don't want to overdo it. I'll just leave the natural sharpening, little tiny bit of noise reduction, not that it really needs it, especially when printing. Noise is actually, I love noise in printed images. It actually helps if it's not a super crisp printer, kind of blend. So if you get too sharp, it'll look a little weird. I'm not that experienced in printing, but I do it occasionally. Actually going to warm it up even more. Might be too much because the sun right now wasn't 5500. Yeah, no, it's probably like 5200. It's probably much closer. All right, I'm going to add more contrast. Let's get real contrasty today. Pull the shadows up just a tad. Pull the blacks back down to keep the blacks black. I'm not going to name any photographers, but there's some guys out here that are pimping themselves real hard and they're like, they have that super HDR look where they pull their shadows like to 100%, and they don't touch the blacks. Sorry, Robert, I'm just reading your comment. Yeah, and there's also, if I'm not responding right away, there's a 6-second delay, I believe, on my stream. I didn't set the latency, which that's okay. Yeah, no, honestly, I've been thinking about shooting some film too. I have an old Canon FTB um, that I want to use. That was actually my dad's when he was in college. Kept up pretty well. And then I have an old Minolta as well, or whatever it's called. And I've been very tempted to get some Portra 400. And what else did I want to get? I want to get I love Velvia for some reason. They're so contrasty and so punchy, but I mean that's my style. I know the style in photography right now. It's like Portra and the Fuji, what's it called, Fuji 400 or whatever it is. I know that's like what's hot right now and what all the film guys are shooting. Which I don't know. There's just something about Velvia that I love. Oh yeah, Cinestill's awesome too. Yeah, especially for nights, it compensates the colors, especially the magentas and everything, really well. Yeah, the Cinestill's awesome, awesome stuff. But yeah, I know I need to dive back into film. I honestly haven't shot a lot of film. I know once I do it, I'm gonna want to go all in and get a freaking Leica M6, but I don't want to spend that money right now. Anyways, back to this. But yeah, if I did, I would go scanning and then I'd scan it, put it in Lightroom, and then do slight edits from there. Looking pretty decent. Pull the whites up even more. Check it on the screen here. It still looks pretty decent. And I mean, the ground is pretty dark already, which is good. A little bit of blacks back in there. Oops. Saturation. Done. And then what I like to do is add a little bit of highlights into the highlighted areas of the shadows, but only the highlighted areas. Especially since this Viper has these very I don't want to be mean, but we'll be nice and say tasteful chrome wheels. Oh yeah, Agfa films are good too for daylight. Yeah, really punchy. They're surprisingly not like so punchy where it's like an offset. Like Velvia really punches you in the face with the colors. Pull that back. Looks good. I'm actually pull the vibrance down a little bit. I think it was a little too much. Yeah, one thing that really drives me crazy, there's photographers that shall go nameless that do this kind of stuff. Ugh. Ugh. Gives me the heebie jeebies. Go too blue. Gotta pull the. Yeah, oh yeah, the subtle purple and that. Oh yeah, you're right. I was thinking about Oh man, I can't remember what film. A little bit of purple back into the blues. Just a tiny. Oh, man, it's too much. Just a tiny bit. And then, yeah, it just really depends. Like if you want the clouds to stand out, but you don't want to get super crazy with them, I like pulling the highlights and shadows up actually, and I'm really glad they added this dehaze tool. Looks good. I'm not even gonna touch the reds. The reds look good, but yeah, yeah. And then you can do other things. Like I've been kind of changing up what I do lately too. I don't want to just take pictures of cars. I want to actually like capture people looking at the cars it shows as well. For some reason, that's always fun. Yeah. So then that looks pretty decent. Pull the highlights down a little bit. Yeah. So I think that is really all I do with this image. I'm going to jump into this last one, do a real speed edit, get it cropped 4:5 or 8:10, however you want to look at it. This is from one of my favorite little local car shows in Laguna Beach at Another Kind Cafe. Always amazing cars that show up. Some pretty cool people too. Um, a lot of roofs have showed up before. This beautiful Shelby, and thanks for calling for bringing this sucker out. Um, so this one I'll jump in. I like if you want to go presets. Water real quick. Presets for this one, I'll use Portra 400. It's the old school VSCO presets. I love these things. These are the ones I use, and then Velvia. You can see all those blue and purples in there. All right. Whoa. Pull the shadows out. Blacks down. Actually gonna trying to find more neutral grays. There we go. Kind of give it that film look. A little bit of sharpening, mask it. And then you can either leave the grain or take it out. I'll just take it out just for this one, but I usually like leaving the grain. It kind of helps with the sharpness in Instagram too. Kind of fights back against the algorithm, which is kind of cool. But I try not getting too heavy with it. All right. I pretty much dig the colors. Kind of add maybe a little bit of highlights coming down from the sun, a little bit of warmth from that direction. Oh God, that's the thing. This parking lot's not even, so everything looks all weird. Um, and then for the contrast and everything on this vehicle, I'm going to bump the exposure up. I'll just start here. Oh, that's way too bright, but I'll fix it. Show selected mask. Kind of go over real quick because I got to get going real soon. All right. 0.4 on the exposure, pull the contrast up, go with the dehaze so there's not too much haze in there. And then let's see, and there's also this new hue adjustment tool, which is incredible. You can do certain selections of where you painted. So I'm actually going to pull a little bit more greens out of it. It's still a little hot on the front of the car. All right, that looks good to me, and I'll kind of do my little test, shut my eyes open. My eyes are drawn right to the front of this Mustang, kind of right in this area, and it kind of gets the focus. And there's a lot more work I'd have to do, but here's the before and after. Might be a little too warm. There we go. That looks a little bit better. That looks a little bit more than how I actually saw it. And then just depending on what you want to do, you can either add some vibrance to it or not. I actually like this image a little desaturated. I think it gives it a better feel, better mood. But well, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you guys for the comments. Thanks for the likes. Trying to kind of do this mainly for fun, and I just think I just enjoy helping as well. All right, there's a before after. Kind of go back, but that's really it for the stream today. Um, yeah, so that's the stream. I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna try to come up with other ideas. I have a couple things on my little list here to do. I'll probably do workflow next, but I'm gonna wait until I actually go to a Cars and Coffee this weekend, and then maybe on Sunday I'll just kind of film something. I don't know if I'm gonna do it on a live thing or if I'm actually gonna film it and then post it after, but most likely I'm gonna try to keep everything live so I can get live comments. Oh yeah, no problem, Remy. Thank you for joining the stream to Robert and Emmy today. I appreciate it. I hope you guys learned something. um, yeah, so if any time to anybody who comes in after, all my streams will not be taken down after I film them. They'll just be posted so you can come back and watch, and especially the first 5 freaking minutes of me talking to myself with my microphone off. That was awesome. But yeah, that's it for the stream today. There's the before and after again, and all right, gotta head out and go back to my real job that pays the bills. All right, thanks again, everybody.